He once said, "People do not really want freedom. They want the comfort of obedience." But when it came to women, Sigmund Freud found something even darker. Vienna, 1907. Smoke fills the study. A woman sits across from Freud, trembling, breath unsteady, eyes burning with confusion. "I hate him," she says. "He hurts me. Yet I can't stay away." Freud leans forward, voice cold and curious. "Then perhaps it isn't hate, it's hunger. The female psyche is drawn to danger as a flame to the moth. It is not madness, but instinct. She loves not the wound, but the man who dares to wound. This is not about romance, it's about attraction to power, chaos, and the forbidden. The brutal truth Freud uncovered and the world still denies. Vienna, 1898. The gaslight hums softly in Freud's consultation room. Shadows tremble across the wallpaper, as if the building itself were breathing. A woman sits in front of him, young, elegant, her eyes both wounded and wild. She speaks with the tone of someone confessing a crime. "He frightens me," she says, her fingers gripping the fabric of her dress. "He shouts, he drinks, he disappears for nights. And yet—" Freud looks up, waiting. "And yet when he returns," she whispers, "I can't breathe until he touches me. It's as if the same hand that hurts me also wakes me." Freud leans back, his cigar smoke swirling between them like fog. He studies her in silence, not as a victim, but as a mystery. Then softly he asks, "Would you still love him if he were safe?" She looks at him, startled. Her lips part, but no sound escapes. The question hangs in the air like thunder before rain. Freud watches as her eyes fill with confusion and something darker, truth she doesn't want to see. The silence becomes unbearable. She lowers her head. He writes quietly in his notebook. Her terror does not repel her. It sustains her. She seeks danger not to die, but to feel alive. Later that night, the rain has not stopped. Freud sits alone in his study, the candle melting into a pool of wax beside his papers. The faint ticking of the clock is the only sound. He replays her words over and over. "He frightens me, but when he holds me, I feel alive." He closes his eyes. That sentence has teeth. He begins to write, "The human soul is drawn to danger, not destruction, but intensity. The forbidden excites the spirit. Women do not seek pain, they seek the pulse beneath it." He dips his pen again, the ink trembling on the tip. "Safety," he continues, "is a slow death. The secure man inspires comfort, but not passion. The dangerous man awakens something primal, the shadow within the heart that refuses to be tamed." Freud looks out the window at the dark streets of Vienna. The lamplight reflects in the puddles like broken mirrors. He mutters under his breath, "The soul prefers chaos to numbness." The next morning in the lecture hall, Freud's colleagues sit in neat rows. Their suits are perfect, their faces skeptical. One man, Dr. Brewer, laughs after Freud presents his case. "So, Professor," he says mockingly, "you mean to tell us that women enjoy their suffering?" Freud's eyes remain calm. "No," he says, "they do not enjoy pain. They are possessed by it. They are drawn to the intensity that life denies them elsewhere." The room grows quiet. He walks slowly to the blackboard and writes 3 words: love, fear, desire. Then he turns to them. These are not separate. They are one motion of the same storm. He lets the chalk fall. The men shift uncomfortably. None of them want to believe him, but Freud knows what he has seen. In the trembling hands, the trembling voices, the trembling souls of his patients. He writes in his notes that night, "The danger they desire is not death, but awakening. When passion fades, the woman seeks it again in conflict, in intensity, in the shadow of power. The dangerous man is a mirror, reflecting the chaos she feels inside." That night, the study is heavy with silence. Freud sits in his chair, coat undone, cigarette trembling between his fingers. The candle burns low. He whispers into the smoke, "Perhaps love itself is not a cure, but a disease with meaning." He glances at a small photo of his wife, Martha. Her face is gentle, kind, too kind. He feels guilt, then pity, then nothing. He writes again, "In every desire there is death, but in every death there is also rebirth." Women are not drawn to danger, they are drawn to transformation. The dangerous man destroys her illusions, and in the wreckage, she finds herself. The wind rattles the window pane. Freud stands and walks to the mirror. His reflection stares back at him, tired, haunted. "And what of men?" he asks aloud. "Do we not crave the same fire, but fear to admit it?" He touches the mirror's cold surface. His voice drops to a whisper. "Perhaps love is a controlled madness. And women," he smiles faintly, "have learned to dance with it better than we have." He closes his notebook. The candle flickers once, twice, then dies. The smoke rises like a final thought. Freud did not invent desire. He only dared to look at it. Beneath every woman's longing, he saw not weakness, but power. The power to feel, even when it hurts. To Freud, love was never gentle. It was a storm, disguised as affection. And in that storm, women were not victims. They were explorers. In the quiet of that Viennese room, one man uncovered what the world still fears to say, that danger and desire are not enemies. They are twins, born of the same fire. Freud's study, Vienna, 1900. Rain trails down the window like veins of glass. His desk is buried in open books. Greek myths, biblical stories, fragments of poetry. He runs his fingers along the words Eve, Pandora, Helen of Troy. He reads softly under his breath. Eve reached for knowledge. Pandora opened the box. Helen followed desire across the sea and burned 1,000 ships. He leans back, eyes distant. Every myth, he mutters, teaches the same lesson, that the woman who seeks too deeply must pay a price. The candlelight flickers. His face looks both enlightened and haunted. He writes in his journal, the pen scratching violently across the page. The world fears the woman who hungers, so it calls her dangerous. Yet without her hunger, there would be no birth, no beauty, no fire. The storm outside roars louder. Freud closes the book and whispers, they were not sinners. They were mirrors. They reflected what men could not face in themselves, the desire to disobey. He sets the pen down, staring at the candle flame until it trembles. For a moment he sees not Eve, not Pandora, but the eyes of every woman who has ever sat before him, trembling between guilt and pleasure. They were punished, he says quietly, for wanting what men secretly crave. Morning. Freud walks through the university courtyard, his coat dark against the pale snow. Students hurry past, laughing, gossiping, alive. He stops under an archway and opens his small leather notebook. The ink stains his glove as he writes, civilization demands gentleness from women, restraint, silence, obedience. Yet it praises men for their wildness, their ambition, their conquest. The attraction, therefore, is not a mystery. It is balance seeking its chaos. He watches a young couple arguing across the courtyard. The girl's face is flushed, angry, yet her eyes never leave the man's. See how she leans closer as he raises his voice, Freud whispers to himself. Her fear and fascination are one. A gust of wind scatters his notes across the stone floor. He kneels to gather them, but one page drifts away, caught in the wind, a page that reads, "Passion is not love. It is the collision of two opposite hungers, one to lose control, the other to find it." Freud stands again, looking at the paper vanish into the snow. And that, he mutters, is why they keep finding each other. Vienna at night, chandeliers glowing like golden suns, violins crying softly in the background. Freud attends a winter ball at the insistence of his colleague. He stands at the edge of the room, distant, almost invisible. The women glide across the marble floor, laughing, their dresses flowing like waves. Around them move the men, soldiers, poets, men who live dangerously. The air hums with flirtation and perfume. Freud's eyes follow the pattern. The women drawn to the bold, the reckless, the untamed. The quiet, safe men stand at the edges, glasses half empty, smiles polite and lifeless. Freud murmurs to himself almost sadly, they crave the spark that burns. He watches as one woman, radiant and unashamed, dances with a man in uniform. Her hand trembles as he whispers something in her ear. She laughs, but it is not joy. It is surrender. Freud closes his eyes. For a moment the music fades, and all he hears is the rhythm of the human heart. Chaotic, desperate, alive. The body knows before the mind does, he whispers. It always turns toward the flame. When he opens his eyes again, he sees himself reflected in a large gilt mirror across the room. A still man surrounded by motion. And what of me, he thinks? Am I the observer, or the coward who has learned to fear his own fire? The violin swells. He turns away, retreating into the shadows. Midnight. Freud's study. The city sleeps beneath a pale fog. Only his candle remains. One small sun in a universe of darkness. He writes with unusual urgency, his handwriting wild and uneven. A woman's heart does not want safety. It wants aliveness, even if it comes wrapped in pain. She seeks the man who reminds her that she still exists. He pauses, his hand shaking. He thinks of the patients he's seen, the wives, the widows, the dreamers, the broken. Each of them told the same story in a different language. He frightens me, but I can't let him go. He makes me cry, but I can't stop returning. Freud leans back and exhales. Because, he writes, danger gives meaning to safety. Pain gives shape to pleasure. Without contrast, the heart cannot feel. He lights another cigarette. The smoke twists upward like thought. Men, he continues, seek peace in passion. Women seek passion in peace. This is the eternal dance, the longing for what the self denies. He sets the pen down and stares at the wall, where the candlelight paints a trembling shadow of himself. He whispers, perhaps desire is not about another person at all. Perhaps it is the soul trying to wake itself from sleep. Outside, a church bell tolls once, twice, thrice, the hour of reflection. Freud closes his notebook and blows out the candle. The darkness embraces him gently, as if saying, you understand too much. Freud saw desire not as sin, but as symmetry, the universe balancing its opposites. Women were not weak for wanting danger. They were human for craving aliveness. In every heartbeat lies a contradiction, the longing for peace and the hunger for fire. Freud called it instinct. We call it love. To be loved safely is comfort. To be loved dangerously is life. Vienna, 1902. A gray dawn leaks through the narrow windows of a prison. The air smells of metal and regret. Guards lead Freud down the corridor, boots echoing on stone. He sits across from a tattooed man, a murderer by law, a lover by confession. The prisoner places a stack of letters on the table, each sealed with lipstick, tied with ribbon. Freud flips one open. A woman's handwriting trembles across the page. You frightened me, but you also made me feel alive. I dream of you every night. Freud looks up. The man smiles faintly. Why do they return to you? Freud asks. The prisoner leans back, eyes steady. Because I make them feel real. Out there, they live half asleep. With me, they wake up. Silence fills the room. Thick, unsettling. Freud notes the rhythm of the man's voice, calm, unapologetic, oddly tender. In his notebook, Freud writes, the dangerous man does not seduce with beauty, but with certainty. His darkness offers contrast, the light they have forgotten within themselves. When he leaves the cell, the echo of the man's words follows him like footsteps he can't erase. Back in his study, Freud spreads his notes across the desk. The candle burns low, shadows crossing the pages like living things. He draws two silhouettes, one of a man shielding a woman, the other of the same man towering over her. Beneath both, he writes, protector/predator. The instinct is the same, he murmurs. The difference is choice. He recalls myth again, Zeus, Achilles, Tristan. Heroes both adored and feared. Women, he dictates into his recorder, do not desire cruelty. They desire power restrained by conscience. The lion who chooses calm, not the lamb who offers none. The firelight flickers on his face. For a moment, his reflection in the window looks like two men. Freud in his shadow. He writes, danger awakens femininity because it forces feeling. In safety, the heart sleeps. In tension, it beats, his pen slows. A strange stillness comes over him. Perhaps, he adds softly, the same is true for all of us. Afternoon. Freud lectures in a small hall filled with students and smoke. Chalk dust floats like mist as he draws a circle on the blackboard. Eros and Thanatos, the forces of life and destruction intertwined. A young female assistant raises her hand. Her tone is firm but curious. Professor, are you saying women desire cruelty? The room stills. Freud lowers the chalk. No, he says quietly. They desire the man who could be cruel, but chooses not to be. He steps closer, his voice low, hypnotic. Because within that choice lies proof of power and proof of love. Restraint is what separates danger from evil. He turns to the class. When a woman feels a man's strength yet knows he will not harm her, she feels the rarest thing of all, safety inside danger. That is what ignites devotion. The assistant watches him carefully. There is no flirtation in her gaze, only recognition. Freud writes on the board, the potential for chaos creates the experience of trust. He pauses, then adds beneath it, to be dangerous and gentle, that is what fascinates the soul. Night again. The streets of Vienna are silent under snow. Freud sits alone, the lamplight trembling as he writes his final notes for the day. He sketches a heart split down the center, one side black, one side white. At the top, he writes, the shadow of Eros. His thoughts flow like confession. Love hides inside danger. The pulse quickens not from safety, but from risk. The feminine spirit seeks intensity, not assurance. He remembers the patient from weeks ago, the trembling woman who said, he frightens me, but when he leaves, I feel empty. Perhaps, he writes, Eros is not gentle. It is the collision of chaos and compassion, the fire that both warms and burns. Freud leans back, weary. The city clock tolls midnight. He whispers to the quiet room. Every woman carries a secret. She wants to be seen by the man who could destroy her, and chooses instead to protect her. The ink dries slowly on the page, as if reluctant to end. He closes the notebook and blows out the lamp. The last glow fades, leaving only the outline of his face and the lingering scent of smoke. Freud did not glorify danger. He exposed its magnetism. In every woman's longing for the dangerous man lies a paradox, a search for the heart that is powerful enough to wound, yet wise enough to hold. And in every man's struggle to control his shadow lies the measure of his humanity. The dangerous man archetype is not born of violence. It is born of depth. Vienna, 1903. The air inside Freud's office feels dense, a strange blend of tobacco smoke, sandalwood, and unspoken secrets. On his desk lies a list of names, couples from different walks of life. Artists, merchants, aristocrats, even a seamstress married to a soldier. Freud has handpicked them all for a private study that no one else dares to conduct. He adjusts his spectacles, scanning his notes. Desire cannot be understood in solitude, he murmurs. It reveals itself only in relation, when one heart begins to pull against another. The couples arrive one by one. Some hold hands tightly, others avoid each other's eyes. Freud greets them with his measured calm, his voice carrying both authority and curiosity. Tell me, he begins gently, when do you feel most alive in love? At first they hesitate. Then the women begin to speak. One confesses that she only feels passion when her husband becomes jealous. When he looks at me as if I belong to him, even for a second. Another admits that her lover's silence, his cold withdrawal, excites her more than any kind word. A third whispers, trembling. When he argues, when he's angry, I feel him then. Otherwise, he feels like a ghost, Freud writes swiftly in his notebook. It is not violence they desire, he notes. It is vitality. To be seen so completely that it burns across the room, the men look confused, some offended, some fascinated. Freud asks one of them, a gentle banker, "When was the last time you saw your wife's eyes filled with fire?" The man stammers, I, I do not wish to upset her." Freud leans forward. "Perhaps that is precisely the problem. You protect her from pain, but in doing so, you protect her from feeling." The woman beside him lowers her head. Tears glisten on her lashes. She knows it's true. That evening, Freud sits by lamplight, surrounded by a chaos of papers. His pen scratches across the page like a surgeon's scalpel. "Security breeds boredom," he writes. "Boredom breeds betrayal. The dangerous man keeps her alive, not safe." He recalls the eyes of the women he interviewed, their voices quivering not from fear, but from longing. A longing not for suffering, but for intensity, for the raw pulse of life that polite society has suffocated. He thinks of how the world has trained women to smile softly, to obey, to conceal their hunger for depth and wildness. But that hunger never died. It merely went underground, into dreams, fantasies, secret diaries, whispered confessions in candlelight. Freud closes his eyes, whispering to himself, "Perhaps desire is the rebellion of the soul against safety." In his mind, he sees the outline of the dangerous man, not a brute, but a force, confident, unpredictable, alive. The man who could destroy, but instead chooses to control that power. That restraint, that shadow of potential danger, is what ignites the flame of attraction. A woman does not desire to be hurt. She desires to be moved. A week later, Freud receives a visit from a woman named Clara, one of his former patients. She enters the room with the composure of someone who has suffered beautifully. "Your paper caused quite the storm," she says, half smiling. "I've heard," Freud replies. "And you? What did you think?" She hesitates, then speaks softly. "I think you are right. I married a good man, kind, reliable, but my heart stopped beating years ago. When I read your words about danger, about intensity, I understood what I had buried." Freud studies her carefully. "And what did you do with that understanding?" "I stopped pretending," she says. "For the first time in my life, I feel alive again, even if it means I must walk alone." Freud's eyes glimmer. "Then perhaps the truth was worth the scandal." She nods. "They call you immoral, doctor. But perhaps immorality is simply what terrifies society, the untamed side of truth." He leans back in his chair, smoke swirling around him like thoughts materializing from air. "Truth," he says quietly, "is not immoral. It's merely uncomfortable." They sit in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that feels like understanding rather than emptiness. Before she leaves, Clara turns and says, "You made me realize something, doctor. Women don't want to be saved. They want to be seen, even if it burns." Freud writes that line down the moment she exits. He underlines it twice. "Women do not crave safety," he writes. "They crave presence." The dangerous man is not the one who threatens her. He is the one whose depth mirrors her own. Weeks later, Freud stands before a small group of students. His lecture is quiet, intimate, more confession than theory. "People have misunderstood my work," he begins. "They think I glorify cruelty. But I do not. I glorify awareness, the courage to see what lies beneath the surface of civility." He pauses, looking at each of them in turn. "A woman's attraction to danger," he continues, "is not a flaw. It is a sign that she seeks something deeper than comfort. She seeks life, raw, unpredictable, meaningful." He closes his notes. "And so do we all." The room is silent. The students are unsure whether they've witnessed a lecture or a revelation. Freud smiles faintly. "Remember," he says as he gathers his papers, "truth always begins as blasphemy." Outside, the evening wind carries the scent of rain through the city. Somewhere, a woman laughs, sharp, free, alive. And Freud, walking home under the dim lamplight, whispers to himself one last line for his journal. "The dangerous man does not destroy her peace. He awakens her soul. The nights in Vienna grow colder, but inside Freud's home, the warmth has begun to fade. His wife Martha moves quietly through the house, careful, distant, almost spectral. She still brings him tea at his desk, still smooths the wrinkles in his coat before he leaves for lectures, but her eyes no longer linger on his face. "Sigmund," she says one evening, her voice fragile as glass, "you study darkness too closely." Freud looks up from his papers, endless pages filled with notes on desire, dreams, and the human soul. "Darkness," he repeats. "No, Martha, I study the truth. It only looks dark because no one dares to light a candle inside it." She shakes her head. "It's not the truth, I fear," she whispers. "It's what it's turning you into." Freud sets his pen down. The silence between them hums with unspoken resentment. He knows what she means, that every revelation he writes about women, every confession of desire and danger, takes him a little further away from the world of simple love they once shared. He reaches for her hand, but she steps back gently, avoiding his touch. "You speak of love as if it were a specimen," she says. "You no longer feel it." Freud doesn't answer, because somewhere deep inside, he suspects she might be right. Days later, Freud walks through the quiet streets of Vienna with his old friend Wilhelm Fliess. They stop by a bench near the river, the fog hanging low over the water. Freud exhales a cloud of smoke, his eyes lost in the ripples below. "Do you ever wonder," he begins softly, "whether understanding people too deeply makes it impossible to love them?" Fliess looks at him, puzzled. "You've always believed knowledge brings clarity." "Yes," Freud murmurs, "but clarity also kills illusion. And perhaps love needs a little illusion to survive." He leans back, eyes heavy. "Martha barely speaks to me. I watch her move through the house, and I realize, perhaps I have studied women too well. I no longer see mystery, only patterns, wounds, defenses. When I look at her, I see a case study, not a soul." Fliess studies his old friend carefully. "You've given the world language for what it refuses to name. But in doing so, you've stripped yourself of its warmth." Freud smiles faintly, but his voice trembles with weariness. "Perhaps that is the price of truth, Wilhelm. To see so deeply that one forgets how to live on the surface." He gazes at the fog again, his reflection barely visible in the water. "People call me immoral," he says, "but what they really mean is, I see what they refuse to see. And that, my friend, is a lonely gift." Months pass. The public ridicule grows louder. Scholars denounce him, priests condemn him, and polite society treats his name as poison. Yet in the shadows, a quiet rebellion stirs. In parlors and bedrooms across Europe, women read his works in secret. They hide his essays under poetry books, devour his words by candlelight while their husbands sleep. They trace his sentences with trembling fingers, words that dare to say what their hearts have always known but never spoken. A woman's soul seeks danger not because it wishes to suffer, but because it wishes to awaken. One writes to him anonymously, "Your words frighten me, doctor, but they also make me feel less alone." Another sends a letter sealed in red wax. "You have put language to my silence." Freud reads them all in solitude. Each letter is a mirror, a reflection of both his brilliance and his burden. The world mocks him publicly, yet the very people it claims to protect, the women silenced by convention, have made him their secret voice. He keeps their letters in a drawer, away from the eyes of critics and even from Martha. Some nights, when the weight of scorn becomes too much, he opens that drawer and reads one. It reminds him that even truth whispered in secret can change the world. Late one night, Freud sits in his study, surrounded by the ghosts of his own words. The lamp flickers. His notes, mountains of them, spill across the desk like fragments of a restless mind. He begins to write again, slowly, deliberately. "When I speak of women," he writes, "I speak not of gender, but of the human soul, drawn not to peace, but to depth." He pauses, then continues. "Every human being carries within them two forces, the longing for safety and the hunger for meaning. Love is the battlefield where these two desires collide. Women have merely been punished for expressing it more openly. He leans back, weary but serene. The cigar burns low between his fingers. For the first time in months, he feels no anger toward his critics, no bitterness toward the world that misunderstands him. Only a quiet certainty that truth, no matter how despised, always survives. He writes one final line before closing his notebook. To desire is not to sin. To suppress desire is to decay. Between danger and devotion lies the pulse of life itself. He places his pen down. From the next room, he hears Martha's footsteps. For a moment, he imagines rising, walking toward her, and saying the words he's never been able to write. I still love you. But he doesn't move. Instead, he closes his eyes and lets the silence settle like snow. The world may never understand him, he thinks. But one day, perhaps, someone will. Years later, when Freud's name becomes legend, scholars will debate his theories and dissect his words. They will argue about his errors, his ego, his obsessions. But the women, the quiet readers, the seekers of depth, will always remember what he truly meant. That love at its core is not a sanctuary. It is a storm, and only those willing to step into it ever truly feel alive. It begins with silence. Freud dreams of a vast, endless corridor, marble walls stretching into darkness, flickering candlelight painting gold against shadow. At the far end stands a woman in white. Her face is both strange and familiar, her eyes burning with an ancient knowing. She speaks softly, though her voice echoes like 1,000 whispers. You fear me because you see yourself in me. Freud steps closer. The floor ripples beneath his feet like water. Who are you? He asks. The woman smiles. I am what you have studied but never embraced. He feels his pulse rise. Desire? She tilts her head. No, I am your reflection. The chaos you have spent a lifetime trying to define. Her hand reaches toward him. The air between them hums with something sacred, dangerous, alive. And just before her fingers touch his face, the scene collapses. Freud wakes violently, heart pounding, sheets drenched in sweat. His study lamp still burns. The notes scattered across his desk now feel like the ashes of understanding. He murmurs, half in terror, half in awe. The shadow is not out there. It's within. The next morning, Freud sits before his mirror, the same mirror he has ignored for years. His eyes are old but sharp, eyes that have seen too much and felt too little. He studies his reflection like he would a patient. So, he says quietly to himself, you are both the observer and the subject. He remembers his patients, the trembling woman who loved her violent lover, the wives who longed for danger, the letters filled with confessions of forbidden desire. But now he sees something different. He realizes that the boundary between man and woman, patient and doctor, is thinner than he imagined. The women he studied were not mysterious creatures. They were mirrors. Each one reflected a part of his own soul he had refused to face. Men chase power to escape their fear of powerlessness. Women chase danger to escape their fear of stillness. But both, he writes in his journal, are simply trying to feel alive. He sets down his pen and whispers, perhaps the war between the sexes is merely the war within ourselves. That evening, Freud walks through the Vienna streets, the rain steady, the lamps glowing like soft fire. He feels both heavy and liberated. In a cafe, a young student approaches him nervously. Professor Freud, he says, I've read your works on desire and repression. Tell me, what is it that men truly want? Freud looks at him, almost smiling. To tame chaos, he replies. And women? The student asks. Freud stirs his coffee, watching the swirl of cream dissolve like clouds. To feel the storm, he says, not to be destroyed by it, but to be reminded they exist. The student frowns. So you mean men and women are opposites? Freud shakes his head. No, my boy. They are twins. Both chase the same fire, just from different sides. He finishes his drink, stands, and adds quietly, desire is not about another person. It's about meeting the parts of yourself you've been too afraid to love. As he leaves, the student sits frozen, unsure whether he's heard philosophy or prophecy. Freud returns to his study late that night. The air feels different, alive, charged, as if something unseen breathes beside him. He opens his final notebook and begins to write what will become his most personal revelation. The dangerous man is not the one who wounds her. He is the one who awakens her. He pauses, the weight of the words pressing into his chest. And the awakened woman is not the one who submits, but the one who makes him confront the parts of himself he thought were gone. He writes faster now, as if possessed by the very dream that haunted him. For years I thought danger lived in others, in the lust of men, the longing of women. But I see now, it lives in us all. The danger is consciousness itself, the courage to see what lies beneath the comfort of illusion. When the ink runs dry, Freud leans back, exhausted but illuminated. The dream woman's voice echoes faintly in his mind. You fear me because you see yourself in me. And now he finally understands. She wasn't a ghost. She was his shadow, the repressed feminine within his soul, waiting to be recognized, not analyzed. He closes the notebook, whispering, perhaps God hides in the places we fear to look, in desire, in danger, in the reflection of our own eyes. The candlelight flickers, then steadies. For the first time in his life, Freud feels whole. Not pure, not holy, but human. It is winter in Vienna. The streets are pale and quiet, the world outside Freud's home fading into mist. Inside, an old man sits by the window, wrapped in a blanket, a manuscript resting on his knees. His breath fogs the glass as he watches snow fall softly onto the cobblestones. The manuscript's title reads, Beyond Pleasure. His hands tremble slightly, but his eyes remain sharp, the same eyes that once looked into the abyss of the human soul without flinching. Freud whispers to himself, all my life I've tried to understand why we chase what harms us, why the forbidden feels divine. He turns a page and smiles faintly. The ink, though old, still bleeds truth. The air feels sacred, as if the universe itself leans closer to hear the last words of a man who dared to name desire. Freud writes slowly, deliberately, every line a confession, every word a surrender. Love is not peace. Love is the highest form of danger willingly entered. It is the acceptance of uncertainty, the worship of vulnerability, the beautiful risk of being seen. He pauses, then adds, we do not fall in love with people. We fall into the parts of ourselves they awaken. The dangerous man is not loved for his cruelty, but for his chaos. He carries a flame that reminds her what life feels like when it burns. The pen scratches across paper as if guided by something greater than intellect, by the raw pulse of truth itself. He leans back, exhaling deeply. We call it madness, he mutters, but perhaps it's divine symmetry, the soul craving tension to feel alive. The clock ticks in the silence. He feels the weight of his discoveries, the scandal, the rejection, the loneliness. And yet, he smiles. They called me immoral, he murmurs, because I refused to lie about the human heart. Through the frosted window, Freud sees a woman passing below. Her posture graceful, her presence electric against the dull gray of the city. She walks with certainty, not arrogance, confidence born of self-knowledge. For a moment, Freud forgets the pain in his body. He watches her move through the fog like a spark in a dying world. She knows, he whispers. He closes his eyes and speaks to himself, or perhaps to the universe. She doesn't seek safety. She seeks depth. She wants a man who can meet her chaos without being consumed by it. The kind of man who walks close to danger but never loses control of his soul. He writes one last line beneath the observation. A woman's desire is not weakness. It is her courage to step into the storm of life and demand to feel. The camera pans slowly to Freud's desk. Candlelight flickers over the final page. The ink still wet, the handwriting fierce and alive. The words read, women want dangerous men, not for violence but for vitality. Because in danger they feel life most clearly, Freud sets his pen down. The candle flame steadies, as though the room itself is holding its breath. He looks out the window one final time. Vienna quiet, timeless, eternal. His voice softens into a whisper. Perhaps, to love is to stand on the edge of destruction, and smile. The wind rustles his papers. One page flutters free and lands near the window, illuminated by the dying flame. On it, in small handwriting, one last note. The truth we fear most are the ones that free us. He was mocked, condemned, and misunderstood. But Freud dared to speak the forbidden truth, that desire, danger, and love are not enemies. They are mirrors reflecting our hunger to be alive.